Welcome, I am 𝐸𝐿𝐸 and your host for Keep Traveling Your African Vacation, the only podcast which brings you insightful information in the African tourism industry by real tourism professionals. Today we have another great episode to bring you, and I have the pleasure of introducing Graeme Simmonds, who's the Zambezi Operations Manager at the Wilderness Group, and today we will be discussing the property Little Ruckomechi. Graeme, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Graeme, tell me, whereabouts is the property located in Africa?
So Little Ruckomechi is located on the banks of the Zambezi River. We consider that the lower Zambezi because it is downstream from the beautiful Victoria Falls. It is adjacent to Mana Pools National Park, so directly north of Harare, the capital city.
Tell me, what's a normal day for you like at the property?
So normal in the safari sense sometimes comes with, Murphy's Law, but there's always something amazing happening or something walking past. The beauty of Little Ruckomechi is that it's in its own private concession and adjacent onto the Mana Pools National Park. And there's no fences. So the wildlife and the bird life and everything are all around constantly. So a normal day at Little Ruckomechi is when guests would wake up. In summer we wake them up quite early, just before sunrise, which would be a 5 o'clock knock on the door. And in winter, it's a little bit later. We're a bit more lenient there because the sun's going to rise a bit later. So a 5:30 wake up in winter. Guests then generally have 30 minutes to get ready. And then a guide will come and pick them up because, as mentioned before, everything is unfenced and any predators or elephants that are coming through and hippos making their way back to the river could be wandering around. You're then escorted to the main area and you have a wonderful continental breakfast that's set up. Sometimes guests don't want to eat that early, so they'll do what we call a to-go basket where they can take some of the food on the vehicle with them. The guide is already there waiting. Usually would have discussed the activity the night before so everyone knows what to expect. We've got various different activities at Little Ruckomechi. The most common one is the game drive. So you jump on the vehicle and you'll head out on a game drive and able to go and traverse large areas of the national park, often hugging the river because that's where most of the prey species are going to drink and feed. The predators, they've been doing this for longer than we've been around. They know where to go to find their food and their meal. We also do have boating activities. Once you're on that river and you've got the call of the fish eagle, and you've got the animals, the hippos, sometimes the elephants are crossing over to the Zambian side, a really special place to be. We can offer fishing as well if guests want. And we also do canoes. So the canoes are generally done later in the afternoon, just because it's a bit safer with the hippos and that. Whereas in the morning, sometimes you might get a lazy hippo who's walked a few kilometers to feed at night, coming back to the river, and then they flops in near your canoe. You don't want that happening. So we just prioritize safety.
I'm sure you do. Tell me, what makes your property different from other properties in the same area?
So we've been around Mana Pools for a few decades now, and location is always key. There's some amazing properties throughout Mana Pools National Park, but what sets us aside is that private traversing rights or the concession, the area that we are operating in. The national park spills into where we are, so we've just extended the national park in a conservation area. And because it's private, we are the only ones allowed to operate in that area. So it gives us access to boating and fishing, which other properties inside the park aren't able to do because it's a national park. But it also gives us our own private traversing rights, where we've been looking after that area in terms of conservation and upkeep for a long time now. And the animals, they kind of respond to that. They know it's a safe area. They know there's no vehicles that are going to be revving or hooting or fires that are being lit that are not regulated. It's got great access to the water with a small floodplain as well, which means the animals can get up close and drink. And it is really predator central. If you said to me tomorrow, out of all the portfolio that Wilderness has in Zimbabwe and you want to see a leopard or a lion, we'd send you to Little Ruckomechi.
What do guests always rave about after they leave Little Ruckomechi?
The number one thing is that they normally mention is the hospitality, the people. We're very fortunate in Zimbabwe to have some of the most amazing people working in the hospitality industry. Well-educated, happy people. We've also got people that have never been to school and they come from the rural areas and they're happy people. We really are blessed to have such a wonderful workforce. A lot of our staff have been with us for, 10, 15, 20 years. And whether you are a local guest from Zimbabwe, a regional guest from South Africa, Namibia, Zambia, or even an international guest that we welcome to Little Ruckomechi, they all tend to say the same thing, that the hospitality is what stood out first and foremost with them. We get a lot of repeat guests, which is great, and they know the hospitality is great. Often people don't believe that they were going to get so up close and personal. You've got elephants feeding off your deck from the anapods that are falling. You've got lions walking past in the night and roaring. But it's such a wonderful place that you are seeing the big game walk past, but it's also the small game. Being being such a protected and well-conserved area, you are seeing honey badgers come past. You're seeing porcupines, their bristles rattling against the bottom of your floors that come through. It really is a pristine and wonderful area, so guests rave about the animals. And then food. Food is, to me, is one of the tricky things to get right in the safari industry, because we've got so many different taste buds and palates that people come with. We rank really high up there with the food, and guests often say there was too much food, but we'd rather have guests have too much food than go hungry.
I'm glad you mentioned the honey badger, because I think the honey badger is well underrated puncher pound for pound as far as the wildlife is concerned, as far as ferocity. I've come across a few in my time, and let me tell you, I give them a wide berth anytime.
They're very industrious and clever. They'll get into kitchens that you think are completely secure. You can hyena-proof a kitchen and sleep well at night, only to come through and find that a honey badger's found a weak spot and managed to get in and try and raid the cookie jar or the vegetable peels that have been left over.
When you're on site, you yourself personally, do you have a favorite spot on the property and have a little bit of downtime yourself?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I can get into the property a lot, and to going there for work and you overlooking some things and that. But there's a few places in the camp itself that I really enjoy. The way the camp is situated is along the riverbed, and it overlooks the beautiful Zambezi. If you walk to the edge of the riverbanks before you get into a little floodplain in front, there's a very shady tree, and you can sit under that, and everything behind kind of fades away, and you're looking onto the beautiful river. You'll hear a hippo grunt every now and then. You'll hear the fish eagle call, and there's always something to see. A big greasy crocodile will slither in generally when you first get to the edge of the bank there and sit. It's high enough that you're safe and you're far enough from the water. And then, as I mentioned, everything melts away behind, and your thoughts suddenly become clearer. You realize how insignificant we really are in the greater scheme of things. And you just admire, the beauty that is in front of you. That's on the property itself. If you take a bit of a walk or jump in a vehicle and drive, there's some really amazing places there. There's a place called the golf course, and the reason it's called the golf course is because as the river drops every now and then, this green grass comes out. So it looks like a beautiful golf course. And you can find a shady tree to sit under that. And now you're looking not just onto the river, but you're looking onto this beautiful floodplain with the green grass that's attracting everything from waterbuck to zebra to impala to even some herds of buffalo that come past. And you sit there and you let your mind just, play its own tricks. Is that a leopard in the tree that you can see in the far distance? Is there a lion watching the herd of buffalo come past? Again, everything just fades away and you become at one with Mother Nature. I normally come back feeling super revived and energized after spending some time out there. Sure.
And tell me, how do you make guests that come from far away places, how do you make guests feel at home and relaxed?
It starts with meet and greet. I always tell our camp managers and the guests, the most powerful tool we have when we meet people for the first time, whether they're repeat guests or new guests, first-time safari goers, or maybe have been to other places. The meet and greet is such a powerful place, We've had guests that have arrived and felt really worried. They don't see any fences. They see these beautiful, large and spacious tents, but they are made out of canvas, and their mind starts to play tricks on them. Is a lion going to climb through here? Is an elephant going to stand on me, etc., etc. And so we assure them of their safety. We assure them that when they are in camp, there's always someone around. If they're feeling uneasy, they see an animal coming close, we'll always be around as well to advise, because living in the area and having the staff there, they can read an animal as best as possible. And then at night, you're safe in the tent. If they are worried, there is an air horn for an emergency that they can blast, and we'll send one of our team immediately. And then we've also got small walkie-talkies. So even during the day, particularly at this time of the year, August, September coming up, when it's really dry, we get the anapods that fall. So the elephants will come into the camp right up, and they'll be feeding on the anapods. And so if a guest wants to make their way to the swimming pool or the main area and they're blocked, they can grab their walkie-talkie and go for it. We then also assure them at night. We will escort them to and from their rooms. 99% of the time it's going to be an armed guide, but sometimes it might be a manager who's got a flashlight. Safety is number one, then security comes second.
What's been your most rewarding experience that you've ever had with a guest? And I'm sure there must be many.
There's so many, I love it when you can see, families come through, and sometimes, children in today's day and age are so connected to the internet. And whilst we do have internet there, we do ask the guests, try and disconnect to reconnect, whilst you're here, really absorb everything. And it's so rewarding to me when you get to see these families, and sometimes multi-generational family, and Little Ruckomechi really sets itself up for that. So often you can have grandma and grandpa, and then you've got their children and then their grandchildren. And you can see the kids really start understanding Mother Nature and putting their iPads down and their phones and that, and asking questions and interacting with the guides, and then interacting with the waiters and the chefs, and we'll start a fire, and the next day they'll ask if they can start the fire, things like that. The one time the parents came to me and said it's been their most rewarding safari, and these were people who are well traveled. They can travel anywhere they want in the world, and they had come to the banks of Zambezi, and I asked them why, because I was intrigued, why has this been their most rewarding? And they said because the kids have really interacted with Granny and Grandpa, and the kids are not going to go sit and play games or on social media. So that's probably the most rewarding. And I'd like to quote a guest, and I cannot remember who they were, but they were guests sitting around a fire, and there was the first time safari goes, and then the multi repeats, and they were talking, and the multi repeats brought up the fact that Africa is such an expensive destination, and I shuddered to think that's not the correct thing. And the new guest said, well, it's not that expensive. We've been on trips before that are much more expensive. Trying to almost play the alpha card. We sometimes get that. And before I could interject, the multi-repeat said, oh no, it's a good destination, but you're going to be back again and again and again and again.
I want to keep going on this particular subject. You've been in this business for many years. There must be a funny story or something that really sits in the back of your mind, should I say, that you're going to maybe tell the grandchildren yourself one day. You want to share a particular funny moment at the property that happened to you over the years?
There's a few, it's trying to think of the one that might have the biggest impact, but I've had incidences where you're the camp manager in charge, and you tell guests, whatever you do in the bush, do not run, and make sure that you stay behind me, etc. when you're walking. This incident happened when there were no guests, fortunately, but I'd heard on the radio that there was a leopard. You often get these leopards that will hang around camp, because they feel a little bit habituated to humans, and maybe they feel a bit safer there, and there's always food around in terms of a bushbuck or impala, etc. And I'd heard on the radio that at the welcome area there was this leopard had come through, and I believed it was the habituated one that you could kind of walk past and they would leave you to it. Obviously a safe distance. It's not a domestic cat. But doing my diligent duties, I walked past and I wanted to check was the guest going to be coming back in 30-40 minutes and make sure that the area was safe. I couldn't see anything, and there was a vehicle that we had stationed that had followed this leopard because it was close, and the driver said to me, no, you can't see anything, so it's gone. So I stood there and I looked and I looked and I looked, and I couldn't see any movement in the bush. And then as I turned away to walk, it sounded like a huge boat engine that had just started outside of the water, and it was this leopard that had now done a mock charge towards me. Rael, I promise I didn't see the leopard because I closed my eyes. I think I screamed like a little girl and I sprinted as fast as I could, all the whilst in my head saying, don't run, don't run. The leopard turned out not to be the one that was semi-habituated. It was a nomad that had come through, and no one had mentioned that. And yeah, when I got to the front office, the other manager there said, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm fine, this leopard. And they said, yeah, I think you need to sit down because you are very, very pale. So yeah, that was one that turned out to be from a scary but probably to a funny one, where you tell everyone, hundreds of times, don't run and just stay still. And then when it actually happened, I bolted.
That's good of you to admit that you did exactly what you're telling people not to do. So yeah. Tell me something. What do you think people misunderstand the most about somebody like yourself and the position that you hold in the company?
I think sometimes people think it's all just sipping cocktails at the edge of a riverbank with a fishing rod in hand type thing. And well, that's 99% of the time. No, I'm just kidding. That's the perks that we get. And I suppose it's for long hours. To get an amazing safari that's there, you rely on a huge network of a team, from the gentleman who will collect the wood, to the lady who might be serving the guests, or the person who designs the menus, to the supply trucks that will be able to deliver the food, to the pilots that can bring the guests and everything. So, that huge network that is necessary never sleeps. And I think that's the one thing where, a lot of my friends think I've got the best job in the world, and I do think I do have the best job in the world. It does come with some of its little stresses, where if anything goes bump in the night, you need to be made aware of it. It can be a generator that might not start and suddenly it's raining and the solar system is kicking in. What's our backup plan? It can be an elephant that has wandered into camp, and instead of going down to the river to drink, has decided to rip up the piping because it felt it was a little bit fresher there. So yeah, it's a non-stop, I think, job, and I think that's what people forget about, that to make all of the wheels happen, there's a huge team behind it, and that team is communicating the whole time.
No, sure. I get it. Graeme, what do you love the most, besides just the views, which I've experienced many times myself, but besides just the views, what do you love most about the area of the Mona?
I think it just encompasses everything that you really want on a safari. You've got the predators, you've got the prey species, you've got the beautiful mountain views on the other side in Zambia, You've got the ability to do canoeing, you've got the ability to do game drives, you've got the abilities to drive late at night because we're privileged to have that private area. The ability to also do walking safaris, where seeing animals from a vehicle is one thing, but jumping out and walking is completely different. And we're not walking up to predators and big game. That's not the aim. The aim is to walk and start to look at the grass, the leaves, the seeds, what animal walked here, why are there scratch marks there? And it brings everything together. And I think the Mana Pools area in particular, where we are so fortunate to be custodians of that area currently and look after that area. And I always say to guests or travel agents that are chatting to me, where should we go? We've only got this amount of time, and you're wanting to tick off all those things. I believe that, Little Ruckomechi covers all of that.
Sure. I do want to put you on the spot a little bit now. Can you tell me someone from your staff or your community that you think really makes a big difference?
So we've got our camp manager there. His name is Bob, and he is known as Uncle Bob. And the reason he's known as Uncle Bob is that he's been in that area even before Wilderness were operating there. So we're going back 30, 35, 40 years. I mean, just as an example, when I was doing our camp walk-arounds with Uncle Bob the other day, and I said to him, let me know, can we check on this? Do you need this? And are the solar systems working? And he showed me this tree. And the tree is, it's a magnificent tree. It must shoot up, 15, 16 meters plus, really high. And that's where the canopy kind of starts up there. It's huge, wonderful tree. And he was proudly standing next to it with his unique smile. And he says, Graeme, this tree was over here when I first moved here. And he showed me, and he was pointing to below his knee. And I said, no, Uncle Bob, I can't believe that. He said, I promise you. And I think he's even got a picture somewhere. And that tree is completely grown. And it just shows not just the longevity of it, but, someone who's just so excited and still remembers back then to where it is. Now, Uncle Bob wasn't a camp manager when that tree was that size. He was just assisting with being in the camp, and I think he's been through every single department, from waitering to housekeeping to cutting wood, maintenance, etc. He is the quintessential jack of all trades. He's seen it all, he's done it all, he's spent time there when it's rainy season and the camp is not open. He's been there when it's been COVID. He's been there when it's been completely full of guests. He's been there when it's got, royalty from different countries coming, and he's been there when people have saved up all their life to come and visit. He really makes a huge contribution there, not just to the guests, but the staff around him. I mean, he's mentored so many staff that have grown and maybe got too big for their role. It all goes back to Uncle Bob and being the mentor that he is, and just a wonderful person. He's a wonderful camp manager, he's a wonderful host, and above all, he's a wonderful, wonderful human being.
Well, that's great. Whenever somebody mentions the word Bob to me in Zimbabwe, I think I recollect back to Robert Mugabe. So it's good to hear a positive stance on the name Uncle Bob, and who knows, hopefully I'll get to meet the guy, and hopefully your guests or future guests can relate to Uncle Bob and will want to visit Little Rukomechi because of that. I just want to ask you, if a guest could take away one feeling after staying with you, what would you want that to be?
Sure, that's quite a deep one. I think I'd probably say gratitude to the world, if that makes sense. Gratitude to nature, and realize why we need to preserve and conserve these areas and not let places get turned into, commercial farming or car parks. The gratitude will come from when the people are there and they see it and they reconnect with themselves. They reconnect hopefully with family members, and they reconnect with other human beings. So gratitude, I think, to Mother Nature, and gratitude for bringing people and thoughts and introspectively looking at oneself back together again.
As we're finishing off, any message that you'd like to share with people that are coming from overseas that are perhaps nervous of traveling to Africa for the first time? What are you going to say to them?
I would say it's always good to be cautious, because someone's going to a new place and that, but you don't need to be. In Africa, we've got the friendliest people, I still believe, and it's not just Zimbabwe, it's all out there. You're going to land at an international airport. You're going to be met by someone representative of the company that you're traveling with. You're going to be handheld and handed over to a transfer driver or a pilot that's going to take you into the bush. And if you've decided to book a trip on your own and you might not have those representatives there and you're just winging it and going to Airbnb and stuff like that, you can still stop and ask someone for directions or help. And that's something that I do love about traveling to Africa. I love getting out there and traveling to the States and Europe and other parts of the world because it's novel and it's completely different. You must see us try and cross the street in Europe. We can cross an elephant herd easier than we can cross a street. But once I get back and I hand over the passport to the immigration officer, whether it's in OR Tambo or Victoria Falls International Airport or Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport, I suddenly feel like I'm back and your soul just feels full again and there's more smiles. So don't be nervous, be excited. Get ready for an adventure that's going to change you for the better and just embrace it. But if you're ever having thoughts of maybe I shouldn't go there because it could be dangerous or scary, definitely not. Definitely not.
Thank you for that, Graeme. And tell me finally, as we wrap up, where can people find you online and follow your story?
So we've obviously got a website that touches on not just the amazing Little Ruckomechi camp, but all of our other camps across Africa, countries of Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and soon outside of Africa. And that's wildernessdestinations.com. And then on our Instagram as well, on Twitter, on Facebook, you can get up-to-date stories. So just search for Wilderness Destinations. We'll be top of the list there. And then, please jump onto Instagram. That's probably the most informative. Saw some amazing footage of leopard trying to take down an ostrich in Botswana yesterday that came out. It's not just about the predators. There's some amazing stories about bird life, wildlife, conservation stories, impact stories as we call it now, with anti-poaching units or nearby villages where we are fortunate enough to be able to assist them with boreholes and schooling and seeing how far their children can go now that they've got constant food source, constant water source. People can go to university now instead of having to tend to the fields if that's what they wish. So there's some wonderful stories over there, not just the wildlife but about the people as well.
Listen, Graeme, thank you very much. You've been a perfect guest. Really appreciate your time and the energy and the passion for a place that I'm very passionate about. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, El, and we'd love to host you. So if you get some time in your busy schedule, you let me know. If you can get down to the airport, we can get you. And then you don't have to take my word for it. You can see it for yourself.
Thank you very much, Graeme. I appreciate it. That was Graeme Simmonds from the Wilderness Group. If you enjoyed the show, please rate the show on Apple Podcasts or drop me an email. All the details can be found in the show notes of this episode, or head over to www.wildsunsets.travel/podcast. Tune in again next week when I will be chatting to another great African tourism professional. My name is 𝐸𝐿𝐸𝐸, and consider this. A few years from now, you will not remember how much it cost you, but you will still remember the memories you made. Keep traveling.